I wish to confess.
You're Tyrion Lannister, the Queen's brother?
My greatest accomplishment.
You admit you poisoned the king?
No. Of that I'm innocent. I'm guilty of being a dwarf.
All right, today we're going to talk about Tyrion Lannister, and in the wake of everything going on with Dragon Age Veilguard, where I've done a lot of thinking on this whole question of DEI and its role and place in stories. And for those of you who don't know, DEI is kind of the diversity, equity, inclusion. It kind of the idea, from what I'm told, the people who promote this don't really do a good job of it. In fact, they're probably the worst at it, from what I can see from here. Because one of the best examples of this, and I'll get this into this, could be argued, is Tyrion Lannister from this point of thing. So the idea of this is you're taking, marginalized characters or marginalized people and making the other people, the greater world, understand their struggle, their individual struggle, for the idea of making the world much more loving and accepting and all that from there. Usually, though, what it ends up being kind of what we end up with is a lot of token characters, and from there, a lot of bad writing. Again, just look up any of the dialogue compilations from Dragon Age Veilguard, and you'll see I haven't even played the game, but I've watched any of the clips, even out of context. It's pretty hard to recover from there. And again, what I was talking about is Tyrion Lannister being a best example of this. Some people may get offended by that because, again, usually DEI, this whole thing is just typified by token characters and bad writing, and Tyrion Lannister is anything if not that. He's an incredibly well-done character, and in fact, when I first started watching Game of Thrones kind of with everyone else in my circle, Tyrion Lannister was basically everyone's favorite character. Everyone absolutely loved and adored him from there. And this is what got me asking this kind of question from here, because I remember reading a Reddit thread a good while back, and somebody asked this question. It was an Ask Reddit question. It was asking, in light of Game of Thrones and Tyrion Lannister, for anyone who's not familiar, he's a dwarf or a little person. He's about right here, while most everyone else is up here. And they were asking, what is the reaction? Has anyone treated you differently have you noticed a better treatment or different treatment in the light of Game of Thrones? Because Tyrion Lannister is an incredibly well-created character, and one of the big things with him is his father, Tywin, hates him for a number of reasons. Let's see. There we go. Tywin hates him for killing. He blames him for his wife dying, but also there's just kind of this continual insult of dwarf. You are an other. You are all these other things. You are despicable. You're despicable. You are the worst. You should die. All these things because he was born this way from here. And so you have this whole character set up. At this point, he was asking the question of, did other people, in America, not in Game of Thrones, and Europe and the rest of the world, the other people treat him different? And there's a number of responses which said yes. In fact, they did notice. They did say that there did seem to be fairly positive as far as everything like that. Because what you have is a character who's unjustly, that everyone absolutely loves, who's unjustly hated for this. And there's a unique struggle. Essentially, it was kind of funny doing basically everything the marginalized struggle, trying to change people's view. However, Game of Thrones is not one of the things that comes up when it's, heralded as, DEI or anything like that. In fact, I saw basically nothing but the opposite of just basically nonstop criticism for, treatment of women, for, this race, that race. Basically, there's a whole bunch of other things going on in the scenes, I guess, which maybe caused everyone to just completely miss what was going on from here. And so that's what I wanted to talk about and kind of highlight this as kind of a funny example that seemingly no one, I don't know, if I was in this DEI crowd, as it were, if I was all about this, then I would be highlighting this first and foremost. And one thing I wanted to begin off with, I think it seems to really be, there's that old saying, if you want freedom and equity, if you aim for freedom, you'll get both. But if you aim for equity first, you'll get neither. And it really seems to be that way with character and this idea of inclusion. And usually the inclusion is kind of a loaded word for this kind of marginalized sorts of stuff from there. And so the idea is if you aim for inclusion, you will get neither. But if you aim for character, good, well-crafted character, you can get both. So at this point, we're going to take a look at an amazing scene. It's Tyrion Lannister on trial for killing his nephew, Joffrey.
Father, I wish to confess. I wish to confess.
You wish to confess?
I saved you. I saved this city and all your worthless lives. I should have let Stannis kill you all.
Tyrion! Do you wish to confess?
Yes, Father. I'm guilty. Guilty? Is that what you want to hear?
You admit you poisoned the king?
No. Of that I'm innocent. I'm guilty of a far more monstrous crime. I'm guilty of being a dwarf.
You are not on trial for being a dwarf.
Oh, yes I am. I've been on trial for that my entire life.
And so what do we have here for this scene? So basically what we have is Joffrey. And this is kind of the interesting thing, because Joffrey is actually the reason why I initially loved Tyrion. Because when you're introduced to the whole world of Game of Thrones and everything, you have the Starks, who are very much the main characters. Like, this is kind of they're almost boring to the point of main characters, which is the reason why Game of Thrones was as successful as it does, because it really took a lot of time twisting all of this main character thing, where basically they just start killing Starks like crazy to the point where everyone's kind of like questioning who's the main character now? You know, this big question of who's going to take over the lead. And so one of the things that's introduced is we have this family of the Lannisters. You know, we like the Starks because they're honorable, they're good. Ed's a good father. You know, he's a loving father. Catelyn, you know, she has her issues, but she's all right, I guess. The rest of the kids are great. You know, they're really fun. Sansa's a little bit of a priss, but, you know, she'll get there. And so then you have this family of the Lannisters who are there, essentially they're rivals. They absolutely hate each other. And so you have all these different members. You have Tywin, who's the leader, who's incredibly, incredibly cold, calculating, powerful, and, you know, he does everything for his family minus Tyrion. Tyrion's down here, and then we have Jaime and Cersei. I think I'm spelling that right. All right, Jaime and Cersei are incestuous because whatever. And all of them, Jaime doesn't really, but Jaime doesn't do anything, so he almost doesn't count. So Tywin hates Tyrion for killing his wife and for being a dwarf, and mainly for killing his wife and saying, you should be dead. You should have died. You should have died with your mother, and that would have been the best thing you could do. Cersei hates him. I don't even remember for originally why she hates him, but they really just kind of hate each other. Maybe it's just sibling rivalry. Jaime's kind of likes Tyrion, but he's very much just selfish. He doesn't really do anything like that, and he doesn't really counteract Cersei in anything. He just doesn't from there. And so what you have is you have this family of the Lannister who the audience has been primed to hate them. And of course, Cersei is the mother. This is the other reason why everyone hates her, is because she's the mother of Joffrey, who's an absolute evil fellow from there. And so we hate basically all of them. We definitely hate Jaime in the beginning. You know, that changes later on because George R. R. Martin is a skilled writer, you know, when he writes, you know. It's really a shame that he stopped writing and that we'll never actually get books 6 or 7 from there. He's in a race with Patrick Rothfuss to never, ever finish another book. And so we absolutely hate Joffrey. And so we're introduced to Tyrion as the only character who stands up to Joffrey. And what you can see here is that, like, literally the whole court, no one stands up to Joffrey. Basically, everyone just completely lets him carte blanche. Cersei does absolutely nothing. Tywin can control Joffrey and Cersei, so he doesn't care. Jaime is just kind of off in his own little world of being the best swordsman and being in love with Cersei. Ick. And then Tyrion seems to be literally the only sane person here. So what is the writer doing? What is George R.R. Martin doing? What is he doing? What are the show writers, when they were following George R.R. Martin, what are they doing from here? What you have is you have all of these characters who are despicable and hateable, and they hate Tyrion. So we have this huge amount of sympathy for this character, because what we have is, you have this aspect of we really, really do sympathize with him. But this is not enough, because I sympathized with Theon when he was being tortured by Ramsay, but that didn't really mean that I liked Theon too much. So you really need something more than just sympathy. But this is an idea we are sympathizing for his character for this, because it really seems like Tyrion's just had a rough life from here. Like, he's incredibly damaged. Like, he's had to deal with all of this. There's this scene where they talk about his first love, was a prostitute. And when his father found out, he had her, gang raped, basically, is probably the politest way you can put it. And this was to teach his son a lesson from here. And you can really see this, and this absolutely scars Tyrion, because he's a romantic. He wants to be. It's funny because Tyrion and Jaime are kind of the opposites, because Jaime is absolutely beautiful on the outside. He is the picturesque knight. And Tyrion is the opposite. He is opposite. He is ugly. He's called an ogre. He's a dwarf. He's not even human. There are all these other aspects from here. But Tyrion's a romantic. He wants to find true love. He's a nobleman willing to fall in love with a prostitute, the lowest of the low. And Jaime, meanwhile, is content, shagging his sister from here. So it's this opposite from here that's going on between these two characters. And then he even has, with Shay, you can see this come into play, where the only thing Tyrion understands is he is despicable. Who would want to be with him? Because he is all of these things. He's an ogre. He's a dwarf. So what does he do? He goes for prostitutes, because he can pay them to love him, because that's the only reason anyone would ever love him. And it's just this brutal, absolutely worldview that he has, but you understand where it came from. Because imagine having Tywin as a father. Imagine growing up with Cersei and Jaime. Joffrey, this kid came from somewhere. He got it from somewhere. From here, so you have all of this aspects, which again, this isn't enough necessarily to make us like Tyrion, but the sympathy, everything that he's dealing with, this is what makes it all the more impressive when he stands up to Joffrey. When he does the right thing, when he is essentially the truest knight of the entire realm. He is the truest knight in, minus maybe the Starks, but we'll just call him the truest knight in that sense, because even when he's fighting against Stannis to save, all of King's Landing, he gets up on the horse and, rides off and does the charge and against the Stannis and leading this. So he even has battle scars against this. He does everything right. He does absolutely everything right. And his father rejects him. Everyone in the court, everyone in the courtroom rejects him. Shay rejects him. Jaime kind of doesn't really do it. He ends up helping him escape, but he doesn't really do a whole lot. He's just it's just ineffectual. He's selfish. He's just looking after himself. Cersei wants him dead. Joffrey, wanted him dead as well. But then Joffrey died. So, haha, sucks to be you. But you have this idea where he did everything right and everyone still hates him. And this is the reason why we actually love him is because of how competent he is. This is something that I've talked about with a number of things, is nobody really likes incompetent characters. So when you have a character that is poor with words because they're, the writers suffer from poor writing, it makes them hate your character. So if you want to make a character who is a member of whatever, doesn't really matter. Like the amount of people I've disliked simply because they were useless and it was really, really, really hard to like them. And it was funny because you could tell the writers were doing everything to do the opposite. They were trying to make you love them and support them and understand and basically they were trying to save the world, because what they're trying to do is change everyone's minds and make them more loving and accepting. And it just, honestly, it seems to be doing the opposite because they're just not really that good at their job. And it's really sad because you do have sympathy for these people, just not some of the people that they write because they're so unlikable from here. And this is what it really comes down to, is you have to have, because Tyrion is all of these things. He is competent. He is smart. He is witty. He has all the jokes and everything like that. And the fact that he can do this despite where he's coming from makes it all the more impressive. You know, he knows how to play the Game of Thrones, you know, what he does with Varys and Littlefinger, and, you know, everything like that, and how he's able to, you know, he's able to escape Catelyn. You know, he gets out with Bronn. I think it's Bronn. From here, he managed to escape. So he managed to get these, like, hood, you know, wilding, you know, cliff people. I don't know what they are, barbarians, whatever they are. He gets them on his side, and all this is going on. And this is why everyone loves him, because he can do all this. And what this ends up is that because we love this character, because we sympathize with him, because we like him so much, when people hate him for being a dwarf, as they call him, for being an ogre, for being a monster, we disagree so much. We're pro Tyrion till the end of days, until he becomes useless in book 4 and 5. But, you know, forgetting that. We absolutely love him. And this is what it is. This is what it takes to actually do what these people, these, I guess, DEI crowds are trying to do. And at the beginning, the thing that has to start off is it has to be good characters. Has to be good characters, has to be good writing, and then inclusion can follow from there. But if you put inclusion first, it just sounds like, you know, HR preachiness, which everyone, it's funny, all the HR meetings I've ever been to, everyone kind of just, you know, rolls their eyes around this like this, but everyone understands it's required because nobody wants to get sued. And that's what's going on from here. So it was just a thought I had. I thought it was actually really fascinating to hear kind of from the little people themselves in this Ask Reddit who were kind of describing this, because it's funny to see fiction actually impact the real world like this in a positive way. And it was one that I never even saw until I actually came across this. And it was funny because I was like, wow, this should have been obvious, but it really doesn't seem like anything's ever come of it or anyone's really highlighted too much of it from there. So, but yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and I'll see you in the next.